Part 1. On the highest ring of the Varelli's Prime orbital station, where the air smelled of polished metal and ozone, the Galactic Concord gathered for its quarterly assembly. The chamber was vast, shaped like a blooming flower made of glass and light, with delegates from over 200 species seated in concentric circles. Some floated in anti-grav pods, others sat on cushioned perches, and a few stood on mechanical stilts just to see over the crowd. At the center of it all, under the soft hum of translation fields, stood Korak. Korak was old for a Zenthar. His exoskeleton, once a deep cobalt blue, had faded to a dull gray from decades of radiation and combat. Scars crisscrossed his limbs, some from plasma burns, others from shrapnel that had torn through his armor during the Outer Rim Wars. He wore no uniform now, only a simple gray tunic that marked him as a civilian. But his eyes, dark and sharp like obsidian chips, still held the weight of command. He had not asked to speak. In fact, he had been living quietly on a backwater moon for the past 5 years, growing fungus and repairing old comms gear. But when word reached him that the Concord was planning a soft integration of the Sol system, a polite term for conquest, he knew he had to come forward. He filed a formal request to address the Synod, citing first-hand experience. To his surprise, they granted it. Perhaps out of pity, perhaps out of curiosity. Either way, he stood now before the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. Clearing his throat through a series of clicks and hisses, Korak activated the voice modulator at his collar. The device translated his native Zenthar speech into smooth, calm galactic standard. "I stand before you not as a soldier," he began, "but as a witness." A murmur passed through the chamber. Many had heard of Korak. His name still carried weight in military archives. But few expected him to look so worn, so small. 3 years ago, he continued, I commanded the 7th Zenthar strike group near the Helios Expanse. Our mission was to secure a mining outpost on asteroid K447. Intelligence said the humans had only a skeleton crew, engineers and surveyors, no combatants. We expected no resistance. He paused. The chamber grew quiet. We were wrong. Korak described how his fleet had arrived in formation, broadcasting surrender demands on all open channels. No reply came. They assumed the humans had fled. But as his dropships descended, the asteroid erupted, not with weapons fire but with traps, magnetic mines hidden in debris fields, decoy signals that lured drones into blind zones. And then, the humans themselves. They came out of vents, tunnels, even storage lockers, Korak said. No more than 30 of them. Wearing patched-up pressure suits, carrying rifles older than your star charts. But they moved like ghosts. They knew every inch of that rock. They used our own scanners against us, bouncing signals off coolant pipes to make it seem like they were everywhere at once. One delegate, a slender Varelian with silver skin, scoffed softly. Korak turned toward him. You think I exaggerate, he said, not unkindly. But listen. My battalion lost 12 dropships in the first hour. Not to superior firepower, but to cleverness. One human, a woman with a broken visor and a voice like gravel, rigged a fusion core to overload using nothing but a data pad and a length of wire. She blew up my command shuttle while my officers were still buckling in. He looked around, meeting as many eyes as he could. They do not fight like we do. They do not rely on shields or fleet formations. They fight like cornered animals, fast, desperate, and willing to die if it means taking you with them. And they never ever stop thinking. A senator from the Krell Dominion raised a clawed hand. Commander Korak, with respect, humans have only just achieved warp capability. Their ships are slow. Their weapons are primitive. They lack the unity of a true galactic species. Are you really suggesting we fear a race that still argues over borders on a single planet? Korak did not flinch. I am not asking you to fear them. I am asking you to respect them. There is a difference. But the mood in the chamber had shifted. What began as cautious interest had turned to polite dismissal. To the conquered, Earth was a footnote, a latecomer to the stars, barely worthy of a trade route, let alone a war. They had conquered hive minds with psychic empires and dismantled machine gods that spanned solar systems. Why worry about a species that still used physical currency and fought wars over water? Senator Dreelan, a high-ranking Varelian with a voice like polished marble, stood. Your service is honored, veteran. But your warning is based on a single skirmish, against a frightened crew on a barren rock. It is not strategy. It is trauma. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the synod. Korak felt the familiar sting of being unheard, not because his words lacked truth, but because they were inconvenient. He bowed slightly. "Then I have said all I can." As he stepped down from the speaker's platform, no one clapped. No one stopped him. He walked slowly through the grand archway, past guards in gleaming armor who did not even glance his way. Outside, the orbital station's observation deck offered a view of the planet below, swirling blues and whites, peaceful and unaware. Korak stared at it for a long time. He thought of the human woman on K447, how she had stared down his plasma rifle with dry eyes and said, "You picked the wrong rock, Bug." He had laughed then. Now, he felt only dread. Back in the chamber, the Synod moved on to the next agenda item, resource allocation for the Sol system pacification. Admiral Vex Torin was already preparing his fleet. Plans were drawn. Timelines set. No one mentioned Korak again, and so the warning was logged, stamped, and filed under minor concerns, low priority. Korak returned to his shuttle. He did not go back to his fungus farm. Instead, he sent a coded message to an old contact in the Outer Rim, a human trader named Frank who sometimes carried Zenthar spices. The message was short. "They're coming for you. Get ready." He did not expect a reply. Humans rarely thanked him, but he sent it anyway, because he knew what the Concord did not. Earth soldiers were not just fighters. They were survivors. And survivors, when cornered, become something else entirely. The galaxy would learn this lesson soon enough, but not before it bled. Part 2. The Conquered fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system, like a storm rolling in slow motion. 50 warships, each longer than a city block, slid through the void with silent grace. Their hulls shimmered with active camouflage, and their weapon ports glowed faintly with charged plasma. At the center of it all floated the Sovereign Dawn, Admiral Vex Torin's flagship, a vessel so massive it cast a shadow over nearby asteroids. Torin stood on the command deck, his 4 eyes fixed on the main view screen. Earth hung in the distance, a blue marble wrapped in white clouds. It looked peaceful, defenseless. Torin had read the reports: primitive atmosphere, 1 moon, a handful of orbital stations, most of them civilian, no fleet to speak of. Just a few rusted satellites and a couple of armed shuttles near Mars. He had expected resistance, but not real danger. This was not war. It was cleanup. "Broadcast the ultimatum," he ordered. A junior officer tapped a console. Across every open frequency, radio, laser comms, even old emergency bands, a message played in clean. "Calm Galactic Standard. People of Earth. Your system is now under the protection of the Galactic Concord. Power down all military systems. Await boarding teams. Compliance ensures peace. Resistance ensures extinction." Silence followed. No reply came. Not even static. Torin waited 10 full minutes. Still nothing. "Typical primitives," muttered Commander Lyra, his second in command. Too scared to speak, Torin nodded. "Begin Phase 1, soft insertion. Take the orbital platforms first." Dropships peeled away from the fleet, sleek and silent, heading for Earth's low orbit. They targeted the largest structure, a station labeled ISS in human script. Scans showed life signs, but no weapons. Easy pickings. What they did not know was that the humans had been listening for weeks, ever since Korak's warning reached a back-channel contact in Geneva. Earth's defense networks had gone dark. Satellites powered down. Comms went silent. Even civilian traffic was rerouted. To the Conquered, it looked like panic. In truth, it was preparation. As the first dropship neared the ISS, its pilot noticed something odd. The station's solar panels were angled wrong, not toward the sun but toward the approaching fleet. Before he could report it, a blinding flash erupted from the panels. Not light. Microwaves. Focused, high-intensity pulses cooked the dropship's electronics in seconds. It tumbled, dead, into the upper atmosphere. Alarms blared on the Sovereign Dawn. "What was that?" Torin demanded. "Unknown energy burst from the station," Lyra said, eyes wide. "But it's just a research outpost." It shouldn't. She was cut off by another explosion. This time from a cluster of old weather satellites. They had been reprogrammed, linked together, and loaded with shaped charges. As Concorde drones moved in to inspect, the satellites detonated in sequence, sending shrapnel slicing through 3 more dropships. Turan's calm cracked.
Scramble fighters.
Full alert, but it was too late. From the dark side of the moon, hidden in craters and lava tubes, Terran missile batteries fired. Not plasma, not lasers. Kinetic rods, tungsten spears dropped from orbit, accelerated. By railguns. They hit with the force of small nukes, but left no radiation. Just pure, brutal impact. One struck the Sovereign Dawn's port engine array. Metal screamed. Atmosphere hissed into space. The ship listed violently. On the bridge, Torin gripped his command chair. How are they hitting us from the moon? Our sensors saw nothing. They buried the launchers, Lyra whispered. Under rock. Under ice. They turned the whole moon into a weapon. Meanwhile, near Mars, Colonel Jake Riley watched the battle unfold from a hidden bunker beneath Olympus Mons. He was a tall man with a scar across his left eyebrow and a habit of chewing gum during firefights. Beside him, Captain Lena Boyd adjusted her headset, her dark hair tied back in a tight bun. They're panicking, she said, watching the conquered fleet scatter on her screen. Good, Riley nodded. Let them think it's chaos. That's when they make mistakes. Back at Earth orbit, the Concorde tried to regroup, but every move they made played into human hands. When they sent repair drones, the drones were hacked using old Earth virus code, something called Stuxnet, repurposed for space. When they tried to jam human signals, they found the humans weren't using radio anymore. They'd switched to laser pulses bounced off space junk impossible to trace. Then came the drones. Hundreds of them. Not sleek Concord models, but clunky, boxy things cobbled together from mining bots and delivery shuttles. Each carried a small EMP charge. They swarmed the fleet like angry hornets, latching onto hulls and frying circuits. One Concord cruiser lost all power and drifted into the path of another, causing a collision that tore both ships open. Admiral Toran finally understood. This wasn't defense. This was ambush. Every piece of human tech, every bit of debris had been turned into a trap. Order full retreat, he growled. Get us out of orbit. But Earth wasn't done. From a hidden platform near the Lagrange point, Private Marcus Cole flipped a switch. He was a quiet man from Colorado, used to working alone in deep mines. Now he controlled the last surprise. The platform unfolded like a flower, revealing a massive coil gun. It fired not a bullet, but a chunk of nickel-iron asteroid accelerated to a fraction of light speed. It shot past the retreating fleet and slammed into the Concorde's main supply tender. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sun. On the Sovereign Dawn, Toran stared at the fireball. His fleet was broken. Half his ships were dead or dying. The rest were limping toward the edge of the system. He had come to conquer. He was leaving in shame. Back on Earth, in a bunker beneath Cheyenne Mountain, General Eli Dawson received the after-action report. He didn't smile. He knew this was only the beginning. The conquered would be back, and next time they wouldn't be so careless. But for now, Earth had won. In orbit, debris from the battle drifted slowly. Among it floated a single Concorde helmet, cracked and empty. On its surface, someone had spray-painted in bold red letters, "Welcome to Earth." Down in Geneva, a human analyst replayed the Concorde's ultimatum one last time. Then she deleted it and sent a new message on all open channels. It was short. Just 3 words, "Try again, bastards." The message echoed through the void. No reply came. But somewhere on a distant moon, Korak heard it. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself a small, clicking laugh. The galaxy had laughed at his warning. Now it was bleeding, and Earth soldiers, they were just getting started. Part 3. The Conquered did not admit defeat. Instead, they called it a tactical reassessment. Back on Varelli's Prime, the Synod held emergency sessions behind closed doors. Admiral Toran was relieved of command, not for losing the battle, but for underestimating primitive variables. A new fleet was assembled, larger, angrier, and loaded with ground troops. This time they would not waste time on Earth. They would take Mars first. It was drier, quieter, and seemed easier to control. The red planet had only a few human outposts, mostly research bases and mining camps. Perfect for a foothold. General Eli Dawson knew they would come. He had studied every war in human history, and one lesson always held true. When an enemy fails in the open, they try to dig in. So while the world celebrated the victory over Earth orbit, Dawson was already on Mars, walking through tunnels beneath the Tharsis bulge with a flashlight and a notebook. He met with engineers, miners, and soldiers who knew the planet better than anyone. Together they turned Mars into a death trap. They did not build big walls or flashy defenses. That would draw attention. Instead, they made Mars look abandoned. They shut down power grids, left vehicles to rust in the dust, and broadcast fake distress signals about oxygen failures. To the Concorde's long-range scans, Mars seemed half dead, perfect for occupation. When the Concorde landing force arrived, they found exactly what they expected. Empty bases, silent comms, and red dust blowing through broken windows. Commander Vex Rel, the new ground leader, stepped onto the surface in a polished armor suit, his voice full of pride as he declared Mars liberated for the Concorde. What he did not see were the eyes watching him from below. Private Marcus Cole crouched in a lava tube 2 kilometers underground, his breath fogging his visor. He had spent weeks wiring the canyon walls with shaped charges. Every rock, every ridge had a purpose. He tapped his earpiece. They're setting up camp in Valles Marineris, right where we wanted them. Above, Concorde engineers began unloading prefab barracks and shield generators. They laughed as they worked, joking about how easy this was compared to Earth. They did not notice the thin wires buried under the regolith. They did not see the drones disguised as tumbleweeds rolling slowly toward their fuel depots. Then, at exactly Oro 300 Mars time, the ground spoke. It started with a low rumble. Then the canyon walls shook. Rocks fell. Not by accident, but by design. Marcus had triggered the first charge, collapsing a support ridge that held back a dry riverbed full of boulders. The avalanche buried 3 Concorde troop carriers before anyone could react. Alarms blared across the camp. Soldiers scrambled for weapons, but there was nothing to shoot at. The humans were not in the open. They were in the tunnels, in the vents, in the old mining shafts that crisscrossed the planet like veins. Colonel Jake Riley led a team through a forgotten maintenance tunnel beneath the main base. He carried a rifle with a silencer and a pack full of jury-rigged explosives. Beside him, Corporal Darnell, a quiet man from Georgia, held a tablet showing real-time heat signatures of Concorde patrols. They're grouping near the comms tower, Darnell whispered. Think they're safe there, Riley grinned. That's where we hit them. They planted charges on the tunnel supports beneath the tower. Then they ran. 10 minutes later, the ground gave way. The tower sank into the earth like a stone in water, taking 20 Concorde soldiers with it. Meanwhile, Captain Lena Boyd commanded a small rover unit near the polar ice cap. Her team had spent weeks hollowing out ice caves and filling them with drone nests. When a Concorde scout patrol came too close, she released the swarm. Dozens of tiny machines, no bigger than birds, shot out of the ice. They latched onto armor joints, shorted power cells, and blinded sensors with strobe flashes. The scouts panicked, firing wildly into the white haze. Some shot each other by mistake. Back at Concorde Command, Vex Rel was losing control. Reports flooded in from every sector. Supply lines cut. Patrols vanished. Equipment failing for no reason. He demanded answers, but his officers had none. Mars was supposed to be simple. Instead, it felt like the planet itself was fighting them. What they did not understand was that humans had been fighting on harsh ground for thousands of years. Deserts, jungles, frozen wastes. They knew how to turn emptiness into advantage. On Mars, every shadow hid a threat. Every silence meant danger was coming. One night, a Concorde medic named Trell found a human first aid kit near a ruined rover. Thinking it might hold useful supplies, he opened it. Inside was a note that read, "Thanks for the visit. Sorry you won't leave." The kit exploded, not with fire, but with a cloud of nanite dust that ate through metal. Trell survived, but his entire medbay was ruined. Morale dropped fast. Soldiers refused to go on patrol alone. Some claimed they heard voices in the wind, human voices speaking in calm, mocking tones over stolen comms channels. It was psychological warfare, and it worked. General Dawson watched it all from orbit. He did not cheer. He knew the Concorde would not give up easily. But he also knew something they did not. Humans had spent centuries learning how to win when they were outnumbered, outgunned, and left for dead. Mars was not just a planet. It was a classroom. And Earth soldiers were the teachers. By the end of the 3rd week, the Concorde had lost over 60% of their ground forces. Their forward base on Phobos was running low on supplies. Requests for reinforcements were denied. The Synod was embarrassed, and public opinion on Varelli's Prime was turning. "Why are we losing to cave dwellers?" one news broadcast asked. Vex Rel finally ordered a pullback to Phobos. As his remaining troops boarded the last shuttles, Marcus Cole watched from a ridge, his rifle resting on a rock. He did not fire. He just let them go, because he knew they would be back. And next time, Earth would be ready for them too. On Mars, the wind blew red dust over empty barracks and broken Concorde gear. Somewhere underground, a radio played an old Earth song, something about Ho. Me in hard times. The humans listened, rested, and prepared. The Concorde had come for a planet. They left with a lesson. Part 4. The war was not going well for the Concorde. Ships were lost. Troops were demoralized. And worst of all, the galaxy was starting to notice. News feeds across the outer systems showed footage of broken Concorde cruisers drifting near Mars, and rumors spread that humans had weapons no one understood. Some called them monsters. Others called them legends. The Synod tried to control the story, but truth has a way of leaking out. In private meetings, voices that once mocked Korak now whispered his name with fear. A small group of officers and scholars, tired of pride and failure, did something forbidden. They left Varelli's Prime in a civilian transport and traveled to the edge of known space, to the quiet moon of Yelos. There, in a dome surrounded by glowing blue fungi, they found Korak. He was older than they remembered. His movements were slower, his voice softer, but his eyes still held that sharp, knowing look. He did not seem surprised to see them. "You came because you are losing," he said, not as an accusation, but as a fact. Commander Lyra stepped forward. She had been on the Sovereign Dawn during the first battle. She had seen the chaos with her own eyes. "We need your help," she admitted. "Not as a soldier, as a teacher." Korak was silent for a long time. He looked at the fungi he had been tending, their caps pulsing gently in the dim light. Then he nodded. "I will not fight for you," he said, "but I will tell you what you refuse to see." They brought him back to Varelli's Prime in secret. Not as a hero, not as a prisoner, but as a guest. In a secure chamber deep beneath the orbital station, Korak met with the War Council. Maps of the Sol system covered the walls. Casualty reports stacked the tables. The mood was heavy. "Tell us about them," urged Scholar Niv, a historian who had studied human culture in secret. Korak sat on a low bench, his claws folded. "Humans do not think like us. We plan in centuries. They plan in moments. We build empires. They build traps. They do not care about glory. They care about survival, and they have survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and their own mistakes. They are not strong because of their weapons. They are strong because they never stop adapting." He pointed to a map of Earth. "You see cities. They see fortresses. You see oceans. They see highways for submarines. You see farms. They see places to hide bunkers. To them, the whole planet is a weapon." He told them stories. How humans once fought in tunnels under cities. How they used weather, disease, even hunger as tools of war. How they would fake retreats to lure enemies into ambushes. How they valued individual cleverness over perfect order. "Their soldiers are not just trained," Korak said. "They are raised in chaos. From childhood, they play games of strategy, solve puzzles, argue about right and wrong. They are taught to question, not just obey. That makes them dangerous." The council listened. Truly listened. For the first time. Korak then studied the battle logs from Mars. He saw patterns the Concorde had missed. The timing of attacks, the use of terrain, the way humans avoided direct fights unless they had the advantage. He realized something important. "They are not trying to win a war," he said. "They are trying to make the war too costly for you to continue." This changed everything. Armed with Korak's insights, the Concorde changed tactics. They stopped sending large patrols. They avoided canyons and caves. They began scanning for hidden wiring and buried charges. They even started using decoy ships to test for ambushes. It worked, partly. During the Battle of the Kuiper Belt, a human task force tried to ambush a Concorde supply convoy using stealth corvettes painted black and coated in radar-absorbing dust. But this time the Concorde was ready. They had sent a fake convoy first. When the humans struck, the real fleet emerged from behind Pluto's shadow and pinned them down. Captain Lena Boyd's ship took heavy damage. She lost 2 engines and half her crew, but instead of surrendering, she rammed her burning vessel into a Concorde fuel tanker, creating a fireball that blinded sensors for hours. She escaped in an escape pod, drifting for 3 days before being picked up by a Martian salvage tug. Even in defeat, Humans made victory painful. Back on Varelli's Prime, Korak watched the battle footage over and over. He saw the human captain's final transmission. "Tell Earth I kept the promise." He did not know what promise she meant, but he understood its weight. The Concorde no longer laughed at humans. They studied them. They feared them. And slowly a new idea took root, not of conquest but of peace. But the hardliners still held power. Senator Dreeland called Korak a traitor. "You teach us to fear vermin," he spat during a closed session. "We should burn their world and salt the stars around it." Korak looked at him calmly. "You can try. But ask yourself, how many more fleets are you willing to lose? How many more sons and daughters will you send to die on a rock they call home?" The room fell silent. In the weeks that followed, Korak worked quietly with a few trusted officers. They drafted a proposal, a ceasefire followed by talks. No demands, no tributes, just a chance to speak. At the same time, on Earth, General Dawson received a strange signal. It was not a threat, not a boast, just coordinates and a time, a meeting point in neutral space. Attached was a single line of text. "We wish to talk." Dawson showed it to Riley and Boyd, both recovered from their wounds. Riley frowned. "Could be a trick." Boyd shook her head. "Or it could be the first smart thing they've done." Dawson made the call. He sent a reply, "We'll be there." Korak heard about the message. He did not celebrate. He knew trust would take years to build if it ever came. But for the first time since the war began, there was a chance. He stood again on the observation deck looking at Earth. It still looked small, still looked fragile. But he knew better now. That blue dot was not just a planet, it was a warning. Part 5. The Concorde was broken but not beaten. Its pride still burned even as its shipyards lay in ruins. After the disaster at Mars and the near loss in the Kuiper Belt, the Synod faced a choice: double down and risk total collapse, or accept that Earth was not a colony to be taken, but a power to be reckoned with. The hardliners wanted war until the last ship fell, but the cost had become too high. Families across the galaxy mourned, economies strained, and whispers grew louder. What if Korak had been right all along? Then came Operation Long Night. Earth did not wait for peace talks to finish. They struck first, and they struck hard. Using captured Concorde tech, stolen codes, and ships rebuilt from scrap, a small human task force slipped past the outer patrols. They flew not in formation, but scattered, like dust on the solar wind. Their target was the Concorde's primary shipyard orbiting Varelli's Prime, the heart of their naval power. Captain Lena Boyd led the mission. She had recovered from her wounds, but carried new scars, both physical and quiet. She wore a patched flight suit and kept a photo of her younger brother, a Marine lost in the first orbital battle, taped to her console. She did not speak much during the approach. She just checked her systems again and again until her fingers ached. Colonel Jake Riley was on the ground team, hidden inside a hollowed-out cargo hauler disguised as a civilian freighter. His job was simple: get inside the shipyard's command hub, plant the charges, and get out before the fireworks began. He brought only a sidearm, a knife, and a small drone named Buddy that could crawl through vents. The plan was insane. One chance, no backup. If they failed, Earth would be defenseless. But humans had never needed fair odds. They arrived during a maintenance shift change, when security was lightest. Riley's team slipped through an old service tunnel, bypassing scanners by crawling through coolant lines. Inside the shipyard, everything gleamed. Polished floors, humming consoles, workers in clean uniforms. They had no idea death was walking among them. Riley placed the first charge under a main reactor coupling, then the second near the central data core. Each one was small but linked to a single trigger. He moved like a shadow, silent and fast. His team covered him, eyes sharp, weapons ready. Up in orbit, Lena Boyd watched from her cockpit. Her ship, the Raven, was little more than a shell with engines, but it carried the biggest payload, a modified fusion warhead, cobbled together from 3 old reactor cores and a stolen Concorde detonator. It was unstable. One wrong move and it would blow them all to atoms. She waited for Riley's signal. Down below, everything went wrong. An alarm sounded, not for them but for a fire in another sector. Guards rushed past Riley's position. For a moment he thought they were safe. Then a maintenance bot rolled by, its sensors pinging. It stopped, turned, focused on Riley's boot, half hidden behind a pipe. The bot chirped. Riley didn't hesitate. He shot it with a silenced pistol, but the sound was enough. A guard turned, saw him, shouted. Chaos erupted. Riley's team opened fire. Lights flickered. Sirens wailed. He sprinted for the exit, Buddy the drone zipping ahead to clear the path. Bullets sparked off metal walls. One of his men went down, clutching his leg. Riley dragged him up and kept running. Boyd, he gasped into his comm. Blow it now. Lena didn't argue. She armed the warhead and aimed the Raven straight at the shipyard's central dry dock, the place where half the Concord's new warships were being built. Tell Earth I kept the promise, she said, echoing her words from the Kuiper belt. Then she fired the thrusters and let go. The Raven slammed into the dry dock at full speed. The warhead detonated a second later. The explosion was silent in the vacuum, but bright enough to blind sensors across the system. Metal vaporized, ships twisted like paper. The shockwave shattered observation domes and cracked the orbital ring. From the surface of Varelli's Prime, people looked up and saw the sky burn white, then red, then black. The shipyard was gone. Back on the command deck of what remained of the conquered fleet, Admiral Toran, reinstated in desperation, watched the feed go dark. He did not rage. He did not weep. He simply turned to his officers and said, "End the war." Peace talks began 3 days later aboard Station Helios, a neutral outpost near the edge of Sol space. The Concord sent a small delegation. Earth sent General Eli Dawson, Colonel Jake Riley, and Captain Lena Boyd. Korak stood with them not as a representative but as a witness. The treaty was short. Earth would keep full control of its system. The Concord would withdraw all forces. No reparations, no apologies, just peace. As the documents were signed, Korak looked at the humans. They were tired, bruised, but their eyes were clear. They had not wanted war, but they had won it. Senator Draylen refused to attend the signing. He called it surrender. But his voice was alone now. After the ceremony, Korak walked with Riley along the station's outer ring. Stars stretched in every direction. "You could have killed us all," Korak said. Riley shook his head. "We just wanted to be left alone. You wouldn't listen." Korak nodded. "Now we will." They stood in silence for a while. Then Riley offered him a small Earth-made chocolate bar, a peace gift. Korak took it, though he could not eat it. He kept it in his tunic, a strange, sweet reminder. Back on Earth, people celebrated quietly. There were no parades, no grand speeches, just families hugging, soldiers returning home, and cities breathing easy for the first time in years. The galaxy would remember this war. Not for the ships lost or the battles won, but for the lesson it taught. Never underestimate those who fight for home. Korak returned to Yelos. He planted new fungi. He watched the stars. And sometimes when the comms were quiet, he played an old Earth song Lena Boyd had sent him. Something about dust, courage, and coming home. The Concorde rebuilt, slower now, wiser. Earth grew stronger, not with arrogance, but with caution. And somewhere in the dark between stars, a warning still echoed. Not in words, but in silence. Because Earth's soldiers had spoken and the galaxy had finally listened.